Hello, hello, hello. How are we doing, brothers? So, this is an important topic because essentially, if you don't master how to balance your socials into your fitness routine and journey, you're never going to succeed in a long term sense. You're never going to be able to maintain the results that you get because you're always going to have a busy period where you're going on holiday, there's a wedding season, your birthdays, Christmases, and at the end of the day, you don't want to choose to whether to have to take part or not. You want to be able to take part. You want to immerse yourself into, those enjoyable moments in life, but still manage your health and fitness with a little bit of balance. But on the flip side, if you just go in all into these holidays, all into these socials, and no consideration for balance, for the food you're eating, for the activity, then you're always going to be stuck in that hamster wheel, spinning, 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 and never making any real progress. So here is a really, really simple guide that I actually use myself and I implement with my clients as well to basically help us balance our nutritional intake and activity during these social occasions so that we can succeed, that we can maintain the results that we work so fucking hard to get throughout the week and therefore live a lifestyle, a healthy, balanced lifestyle that you can enjoy these social occasions with, the most discipline, but also the most flexibility as well. So going into it, lesson content. So we're going to look at weekly balance and how you can look at your balance throughout the week rather than on a day-to-day basis. Give you some maybe example macronutrients of some popular food items or meals that you have when you go out. We're going to be looking at menu red and green flags, things to look out for when you are scanning a menu. Preparation is key, like with anything. So this is how you can prepare in terms of a social occasion and why it's so key to essentially, being successful in this game. And then finally, moderation versus restriction. What is the difference? What impact does each approach have? And how to use the right approach for you. Okay, so weekly balance. What do I mean by that? Well, we tend to look at our calories and our sort of energy expenditure, our nutritional intake, essentially, or our macronutrient targets as a daily. Yes, okay, it's good to look at them as a daily, but when you want to include more flexibility and more balance, it's much better to look at it across the whole week. Because, if you hit 2,000 calories one day, but then 6,000 calories another day, essentially that's going to kind of equate to the body fat that you store and, overall your body composition over a period of time is going to take into account the calories on a longer term basis. So, for example, if your daily calorie targets add up to 15,000 calories per week, okay? And you're Monday to Friday, 5 days, you are at 10,000 calories, 2,000 calories a day. You've been really disciplined, really taking control of what it is that you're eating, and then you're going into the weekend. But boom, the weekend hits. You've got breakfast with a friend on Saturday. You're then going out for a meal before you go drinking. And then Sunday, you're feeling hungover. You order pizza, sweets, chocolate. You then have a midnight scram because you've not had any good sleep, so you're still awake. And before you know it, at the weekend, you've actually eaten near enough 10,000 calories in those 2 days, which then overspills you to basically eat 20,000 calories rather than the 15,000 calorie target that you had for the whole week. Okay, now look at it this way. Look at it how you can use it to your advantage. So you're going to be going out for a couple of meals over the weekend, and maybe you just bump up your calorie targets on the weekend to 3,000 per day. Okay, so 3,000 for Saturday and 3,000 for Sunday. How do you balance that? Well, you could look across the rest of the week and then essentially take some of the calories away from there. Okay, 3,000 is quite a big number to jump up, 1,000 plus your usual daily intake. But we're just using this as an example. So the way that you would do it is you'd maybe look at 4 of your weekdays where you just reduce your calories by 500. And then those 4 days times 500 would then equal the 2,000 calories extra that you're going to set aside for the weekend. Now, in my opinion, it's a little bit too much. You probably don't want to target more than 500 calories over. And if you can keep it to 1 day per week or even 1 meal per week, 1 day per week where you're eating a little bit more, then that's obviously going to be much more manageable. There's loads of different factors. If you're in, a calorie surplus and you're trying to gain weight and muscle, then obviously you've got a little bit more flexibility. When it comes to being in a calorie deficit, you're on a summer cut, you're trying to lose body fat, then of course that's where discipline needs to be more concerned and more considered, and therefore that's where I would only suggest, having one off-plan meal per week. Now that leads into what I was going to say about weekend sabotage. So many people I've worked with in the past, so many clients think they're doing an amazing job, and on the face of it, they are. Monday to Friday, we're absolutely bang on it. They're getting at least 3 exercise sessions in per week. They're tracking their calories and eating, predominantly whole foods, and they're doing a great job. But weekend sabotage is a real thing, and it's self-sabotage. It's the fact that a lot of the reasons for this is because routine becomes non-existent at the weekend. We're not working, the kids aren't at school, you've got different commitments such as, football games to attend or take the children to even play yourself. You'll have social occasions planned in there. You may even be staying over at a friend's or at a hotel for that weekend, and everything just throws, everything being out of sync throws everything into a little bit of a random sort of era. So what can you do first and foremost? It's basically trying to create a routine, keeping to a routine. That goes all the way, it starts at bedtime on Friday night. Try and keep that consistent. Breakfast time, lunch time, dinner time, all consistent. Not exact, but consistent with what you've been doing through the week. The same with your training, the same with your activity. Actually look at the fact you're not working as an opportunity to be more active, to be outside more of the time, to definitely get your gym session in that you maybe missed in the week because of the busyness. The weekend should be seen as an opportunity to flourish, not an opportunity to sabotage. Now, tracking is always going to be super, super key. Okay, we need to track, especially if you are new to this game, you need to track meticulously to have a good idea of where you're at. Now, that doesn't mean tracking for the rest of your life. That is not sustainable. That is not something I promote. I'm someone who is an intuitive eater. However, now I'm in a calorie surplus, and when I do the same, when I'm in a cut, whenever I have a specific goal, I have to track, because otherwise I lose track of where I'm at. I forget things that I've consumed, and I'm not hitting my targets that I need to hit to really get the best results that I want. All right, so tracking is key. Super, super simple. My best advice is using an app like MyFitnessPal, and more often than not, you'll realize you eat a lot of the same foods, and you can just copy and paste into the following days. But it requires your honesty to get the results that you're looking for and to track, essentially what it is that you are consuming. And then finally, motivation. What does this mean? Motivation. What it means is motivate yourself by having something planned at the weekend. Don't restrict yourself completely to that. You're only eating foods that you control. You're taking Tupperwares to dinners and etc. etc. It's not sustainable. You're not a bodybuilder. You're not trying to make a photo shoot at this point in time. You're not a professional athlete. You have the flexibility to enjoy these things at the weekend, and it's important that you start to build them in from the start, so then you understand how they actually work within a balanced, healthy lifestyle. Okay, so motivation is key. So, what are the average calories and macros within your favorite restaurant foods? Okay, so we're looking at Italian first. Now, Italian, obviously, pizza and pasta, and it can vary a lot depending on the toppings. So I'm just going to give you, the average of a margherita. No toppings, cheese and tomato. It's between 800 and 1200 calories, obviously, depending on how it's cooked, how they use oils, how much cheese is used. But that's just, for a 12-inch pizza. Pasta dish, probably looking at something pretty similar. However, with a pasta dish, you can reduce the calories by going for a tomato-based sauce rather than a creamy-based sauce, where something like a spaghetti carbonara can exceed 1500 calories for a single serving. Now, we move into curries. Curries can be even worse. Not only because the sauces themselves are full of fats and creams, but it's the appetizers, it's the sides that go with everything. And before you know it, you can easily exceed 2000 calories in one sitting. That is not uncommon to do. The same with Chinese. A lot of these Chineses have a lot of fried appetizers, spring rolls, samosas, salt and pepper, squid, chicken, chips, whatever you insert there. And typically in Britain, where it's what I call it Englishized or British-sized Chinese, where it's not really Chinese. Again, sauces are fluorescent orange, pink, green, and they can exceed, in terms of calories, way above 2,000. Now, what's a better choice to go through? Now, Thai food, I've spent a lot of time in Thailand, and it's no surprise I actually lost weight both times I've been to Thailand for an extended period of time, even when I'm trying to eat enough to maintain weight. And that's because the food is so clean and the food is so vibrant with whole foods, vegetables, good lean proteins. Okay, so that is always a good option to go for when you are selecting a meal out. Again, anything from a grill or a barbecue spot is usually very good. Only because, or not only because, but mainly because of the high protein levels. You're getting a meal that is centered around the protein. Now, of course, you have to be wary of the sides that may come with it and that you select, and also the glaze that may have been cooked within, or the meat that have been cooked in. But, and then another good option when you are looking for somewhere to eat. And of course, coffees and sweets, these can be a bit of a silent killer, okay? So particularly coffees. Now, if you're someone that grabs a coffee and it's anything but an Americano, then you are adding at the very least, if it's a small cappuccino, 100 calories per day to your consumption. Now, I know a lot of people like to get all fancy with their coffees, and they'll have a frappuccino with a shot of syrup and, oat milk, blah, 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 blah. It's crazy, but they can exceed 400 to 500 calories per drink. So just be aware. And again, it goes back to why you need to track, particularly when you include these types of foods. So, red and green flags that you need to look out for on a menu. And the really cool thing is the better to grips you can get with this, the more confident and the more comfortable you can be in a restaurant setting when you are selecting your foods. So I'll start with the red flags. You want to avoid fried foods. Anything that describes it as fried, get rid. Creamy sauces are a killer. Creamy dressings are a killer. You might even be thinking you're getting a healthy meal like a Caesar salad, but if it's got loads of creamy Caesar dressing in, then you've just kissed goodbye to that calorie deficit. It goes without saying, alcohol is not a good thing. Don't get me wrong, I do love a beer. However, if you are watching those calories, alcohol is one sure way to exceed them very, very easily. Sweets, desserts, try and avoid where as much as possible. Okay, if you're going out for a lovely meal, that might be the highlight of your meal. This is where you can practice more balance in the week to save calories for those. But essentially, a lot of places that you'll go, you'll realize their sweet and dessert menu is an afterthought for them. It's shop prepared, it's frozen, it's shit. Unless you go into a specific dessert place, I might let you off. And anything that's carb rich. What I mean by this is, if the protein is not the center of the plate, and in fact, the carbohydrate is the highlight. And I'll go back to one of my favorite meals, with pizza, pasta, risotto, those kind of foods, they're gonna pack the meal with more carbs because the protein is the most expensive piece of the meal. And this is another thing you can look out for. But if the meal is slightly cheap and you think, oh, that's quite a good price, it probably isn't. You pay for what you get for, essentially. It means they filled it out with more carbs. Their protein is probably low quality or very, very small in quantity. And overall, it's just not filled with good, fresh ingredients. Now, green flags. Now, not to go all glum, but you can actually pick a lot of positive and good choices from a menu. Straight away, you want to look for the grilled section. They usually have something like a Josper grill, poultry, seafood. That's where you want to choose from, because then the protein is the center of the plate, and that's going to be a big proportion of what you're choosing. Often, then, you choose your side. So, of course, choose something along the lines of potatoes, white rice, couscous, quinoa to be your side. Try and avoid things like fries, chips, those typical things that we know deep down, as much as we love them, are not the best choices. And of course, this goes the same when you're at home as well. Bulk out your plate with vegetables. Get vegetable sides, broccoli, peppers, courgette, aubergine, whatever it is you like, because essentially that's going to keep you fuller. It's going to give you a lot of micronutrients and vitamins and minerals as well. And, therefore you're making good quality choices with, much less calories than you may if you pick something on the indulgent side of the menu. Finally, preparation is key. Now, first and foremost, if you have the power, restaurant planning is gonna be really, really effective for helping you stay on point. If you choose to go and eat at a sloppy burger joint and everything is fried, then you're walking into a minefield. If you pick somewhere that advertises that they have this amazing grill, fresh farm food and meat from the local butchers, freshly caught seafood, then great. You're in heaven there, and it's much easier to make a good quality choice. However, if you don't have the power, you can always throw recommendations out there or be prepared for what may be on offer and how you counteract it. Weekly balance, as I mentioned before, so I won't go over that again. Preview the menu. That's something I always do. One, out of excitement for where I'm going to eat, but two, preparation. You get to see the menu. You get to kind of decide what would actually be good, rather than being in a moment when you're hungry, when you're being rushed by others, when you feel under pressure. Give yourself a few days grace and make that choice so that when you turn up to the restaurant, you know exactly what you're getting and you're not going to be tempted to go off piste. Hunger management. So a lot of people actually get this wrong. On the day they're going out for a meal, they essentially starve themselves so that they get to the restaurant and they're super hungry. So when the drinks menu comes, you're going to order a pint because, you're already thinking, I need something to quench my thirst, to really grasp onto more considerable than water or soft drink. Two, when they put out bread in the middle of the table, I don't know if they still do that now. It makes me feel super, super old, but I think they do. You're gonna jump at it like a ravenous dog if you're hungry. What you can do instead is obviously manage your day properly. Make sure that you are feeding yourself at regular intervals, high protein. You can reduce a bit of fat and carbs so that you're not as calorie poor by the time you get to your meal. But a really, really good tactic that I've used for many, many years and use with my clients all the time, a simple protein shake within an hour of actually leaving for the meal gives you a nice setting within the stomach that you're not going to be super hungry, but it leaves you enough hunger to actually enjoy the meal. And finally, moderation versus restriction. If you've ever worked with me or seen any of my work, you know I have a huge passion for moderation and flexibility. You will see me having a pint of beer. You will see me enjoying ice cream. You will see me caressing a chocolate bar against my lips. Without sounding too sexual, what I'm saying is you can have these foods. Nothing is off limits. And you don't have to get in shape to be able to have these foods. You just have to learn how to moderate them into a diet. The 80-20 rule is a great way to do this. 80% of what you eat, whole food, nutritious food, good, healthy choices. 20%, use it for what you want to use it for. And that's how you can look across the week. 80% whole foods, 20% my favorites. Boom. And you're going to make progress. It's the sustainable way of doing it. Yeah, you might achieve results faster if you completely cut out all the carbs, all the fats, all the fried foods, everything you love. But you're going to be a miserable motherfucker. You're going to slip up sooner rather than later. You're going to be the sado in the corner at the socials because you just can't face being around anyone who might tempt you to have a drink, have a cake, have a piece of chocolate. And I promise you, if you learn how to moderate these things early on, your results will last forever. They will last forever. And I can promise you that because of my experience anecdotally, my experience with clients, and the difference between those who learn and those who restrict, it's night and day. Happy, miserable, long-lasting, short-term fix. Which one would you rather be? Hope that helps. The next time you go out to eat, the next time you go and enjoy one of these socials, put some of these practices into place and let me know how you get on. Let's go.